In 1497, Portuguese discoverer Vasco da Gama sailed to India, trailing a new way around the Cape of Good Hope. He landed nearly a year later on the southwestern coast of India, establishing a sea route that would become a key part of the Portuguese Empire and significantly impacted global trade. However, Vasco da Gama also expected to meet the legendary Christian patriarch and king, John Prester. Also known as Prester John, he was a mythical figure believed to be the descendant of the biblical three magi and ruler of a vast Christian kingdom in the east. It was believed that Prester John might be a potential ally against Islam during the Middle Ages. Vasco da Gama did not find Prester John or any Christian community. However, 3 years later, fellow Portuguese sailor Pedro Álvares Cabral set sail on his discovery trip to Brazil with 13 ships. A storm hit, and 6 of the ships sailed back, making their way to India. When they arrived in India, the crew was attacked and 50 sailors were killed. After retaliating by firing at the shore from their ships, the crew sailed south to a place called Cochin, modern-day Kochi. What they discovered there would shock the Christian world. To the surprise of the crew, the city of Cochin was home to a Christian community. Although some of their practices were different from the Portuguese, they followed the same teachings prescribed by the Didache. The central part of their faith revolved around the Eucharist and the belief in the true presence. When asked who taught them these things, they told them that the Apostle Thomas had founded their church in the year 52 AD. This information confirmed accounts from 3rd century texts that claimed that Thomas had traveled east, possibly as far as China, to spread the gospel. A completely isolated strand of Christianity had been flourishing there for nearly 1,500 years. Their liturgy was celebrated in a dialect of Aramaic. Like Christians in the West, these Christians also reserved Sundays to celebrate a form of Mass which they called Kurbana. These Christians had a well-organized ecclesiastical hierarchy with bishops, priests, and deacons. They also had their own monasteries and traditions of asceticism. Remarkably, they even had similar sacraments to Christians in the West. The Portuguese were also surprised to see that they maintained a reverence for Mary. Marian feasts such as the Annunciation and the Dormition were celebrated. Christians in India traced their origins back to the Apostle Thomas in the 1st century. Doctrines such as the real presence in the Eucharist were brought by Thomas himself and developed exclusively through oral tradition. Nevertheless, they are remarkably similar to the doctrines that arose in the West, even though the New Testament only arrived in India centuries later. The oral tradition has always been the primary way of transmitting ideas. It wasn't until the 19th century that literacy rates reached a modest 10%, and more people had access to Scripture. In the time of Jesus, who was a devout and faithful Jew, only about 4% of Jewish teachings were transmitted through written Scripture. When God gave Moses the Torah at Mount Sinai, He also provided Moses with what is known collectively as the Torah Sheba'al Peh, teachings meant to be transmitted orally. In the 2nd century AD, these teachings were written down for the first time in over 1,000 years, providing a unique understanding of the Old Testament and Jewish customs and beliefs in Jesus' time. What scholars learned from this text cast doubt on many beliefs modern Christians still hold today.